always. And we're back. Right next to Matt Waldman on the couch right now, and Gene in the office, and me in where the magic happens in the bedroom here for Week 10 Sunday morning hangout. Everybody, welcome to Week 10. And I mean, I'm the crying on the inside clown because of all this stuff about Rob Gronkowski potentially retiring. We're not going to talk about that. Le'Veon Bell not showing up. I'm not sure how to feel about that. But there's a lot of things, immediate things, Dr. Gene, Matt, that we need to address. Gene, let's just start with Sammy Watkins. It doesn't look like he's going to play. Should we believe that this is just precautionary? Does it add up that this is just precautionary, or could this be one of those situations that sprawl with Mexico City up in the Titanic tilt with the Rams next week?
I don't think it's going to sprawl. I think Ian Rappaport from the beginning was saying the Chiefs were looking to give Watkins a week off. And we've got a bye coming up for Kansas City here in the future too. So that plus them allowing him to do a limited practice on Friday, all pretty reassuring. So unless we hear something unexpected from the Chiefs, and usually they let us know, Andy Reid sometimes even lets his trainer talk to the media, his head athletic trainer. So I think it makes sense that this is precautionary. There's no reason to believe otherwise. Similar to AJ Green, we have to watch just to make sure something doesn't change. But the fact, that nobody let AJ Green do anything before he went to see Robert Anderson, and Watkins was practicing and they marked him questionable. So it really does sound precautionary. Probably not going to be a thing.
Really quickly, while we're on this game, this Kansas City Arizona game, Gene, looks like Justin Houston back this week.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know how many snaps he's going to play necessarily. It's been a couple of weeks of limited practices, but he's not been fully practicing. So it may be a situational deal where he just gets pass rushing and edge rushing opportunities. But yes, he's back.
And on a counterpart, not necessarily the counterpart to Justin Houston, but the counterpart to guys like Alan Bailey and Chris Jones, who've been pretty strong players, the Justin Pugh and Mike Iapati. Mute button.
The wrong button at the wrong time. Yes, so both of those guys should play. I don't fully trust Arizona's injury reporting. Every once in a while, we'll see a guy that's listed questionable who's a little bit more doubtful than you expect. And Mike Iupati has missed games when he's been listed questionable in the past. But both of these guys have had this injury previously this month, had limited practices listed questionable and play. That was the expectation last weekend they played. I haven't heard anything differently, so you would expect them to go today too.
And the last one, important on the IDP side, but also important if there's going to be any resistance on the defensive side. Those excellent safeties, Budda Baker, Trey Boston. What's the latest going into this one?
I think we should be a little bit more concerned about Boston than Baker. But there wasn't anything reported in the local media, Arizona, on either one of those players this week. I think Baker's gradually increased practice participation after the midweek situation is reassuring. Boston is kind of coming back. I can't remember if he played last week or not. I think he did come back last week, didn't he? Do you remember?
They were on bye.
Well, there you go. That's why. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I think they're both going to be back. There wasn't anything from those local guys that made it sound like anybody other than Kim Dichie was a concern this week. So that's the way I expect it to go. Watch the inactive list to be sure. But I think all of those guys are going to play.
So we look, Matt, at this slate shootout, big game. So Kansas City, there's not a lot of layers here. I guess let's tease these things out one by one. First of all, if the Sammy Watkins situation sprawls, or if you're digging deep, if you're looking for a mid DFS play, do you like Chris Conley or Demarcus Robinson better this week?
I think I thought based on camp it was going to be Demarcus Robinson, but now that we're looking at this situation at this present time, it seems like Conley's the one that's taking the field a little bit more and getting a little bit more love at this point. And I think that may have to do with the fact that Conley's a little bit better of a route runner. So knowing that and knowing that he's probably going to be that, second or third read at most in many of these options, you probably want the guy who's going to be where he's supposed to be. Though Robinson's that guy that's going to tease you with the big play because he gets behind the defense. Mahomes scrambles around and finds him wide open behind everybody.
So on the Arizona side, this is where it gets really interesting because I believe the last team that went to Kansas City was Cincinnati. And all year we've been loading up on offensive players facing Kansas City. But actually, Cincinnati put the offense on mothballs like mid-third quarter, and everybody was disappointing in that game. But on the other hand, Josh Rosen has come back from, I don't even remember what it was against Texas A&M, like 35 down, and he just doesn't have a quit in him. You've got Byron Leftwich. You've got a week to prepare. You've got David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, maybe even Christian Kirk. Is this a week where playing your Cardinals is going to pay off?
I don't think we're going to see the offensive lineman carry Byron Leftwich's game plan on its shoulders and set him up to, call great plays, in the second half of the ECU game. But let's just say that I think that you will see, in this type of situation, you could see a lot of yards for Josh Rosen. Certainly, this could be a garbage time game for them. And so there's that possibility. And when you think about what the Chiefs, are weak at, I would say that if you're looking at it from that perspective, Larry Fitzgerald in the middle of the field could probably be a pretty good play. So you're probably going to want to stick with him. The idea of Christian Kirk sounds great, but he's more of that high-low, boom bust play. And then Chad Williams is nothing more than a desperation guy. So I think that you're really looking at just Larry Johnson against these linebackers, testing them against the run. And I think that the run defense has improved a little bit, so it's not going to be unbelievably awesome for him, but he'll be good in receptions. So PPR, Johnson, certainly Fitzgerald, and then your high-low on Kirk.
Yeah, I like the Larry Fitzgerald call. I think that in week 8, under the radar, because it was Arizona and San Francisco and no one really cared, Fitzgerald looked like the player that we thought we were getting when we took him in the 4th round of drafts. And I think maybe David Johnson could look like that guy, at least in this matchup this week. Gene, let's go ahead and turn the page. Another injury that we're watching this week, Sony Michel. And it looks like he's going to play, but should we expect him to get the rough workload he gets and be as effective as he was before his knee injury?
New England's media has suggested he's going to play all week, similar to last week. This week, the tone of the overnight reports from Schefter and Rappaport were much more positive than they were the previous week. And as we've talked about before, New England generally doesn't allow players to play. We're going to be seeing this with Gronkowski this week, especially with a bye week around the corner. Giving him a couple of weeks off, if they weren't certain about his ability to follow through on whatever his normal game plan would be, it would just make sense for them to rest him another week, do what they did last week, rely heavily on James White and other offensive options, and then bring him back in a couple of weeks. And I think they did that last week with the intention that he'd be ready to go this week. So no concern overnight with him. I think that he's likely to see 50% of the snaps, however the game script goes, as he did before the injury. And I think you can reasonably expect 10 to 15 touches from Michel, unless there's some weird report here in the next hour or so. But Schefter and Rappaport have already released their scheduled tweets, which suggests that they weren't waiting to hear from somebody about anything Michel related this morning. So I think he goes. I think he's capable of seeing his original workload. Without knowing precisely what the injury is, it's hard to handicap a risk of re-injury or anything like that. But going into the morning, I don't have too much concern with Michel. It's all comes down to New England's game plan, right? I mean, does it turn out where he gets 7 to 10 touches or 10 to 15 touches? It's really impossible to know until you see how Belichick plans to attack the game.
And it's an exciting world that we live in where we can say Cordero Patterson out of the backfield could muddy that picture a little bit. Really quickly on the other side of this New England-Tennessee playoff rematch from last year, Gene, who's in worse shape, the Tennessee wide receivers or the Washington offensive line?
Oh, the Washington offensive line. Tennessee at least has a couple of we're talking about the bottom of their depth chart primarily. Not that I'm saying that Tajay Sharp and Taywan Taylor. I'm surprised Taywan Taylor was given a chance to play at all. That really looked like a Liz Frank type injury to me. I don't expect him back for a couple of weeks at least. But Washington, they're arguably 4 starters probably. I would be surprised if Moses finishes the game. He always plays and he almost always finishes the game, but that's going to be a tough injury to play through.
Yeah, Tennessee. So let's look at the New England, Tennessee, and then we'll turn the page to Washington and Tampa, Matt. On the New England side, we already mentioned the 3-way backfield, no Rob Gronkowski, which in some ways, well, if it was Gronk of old, would limit the offense, but maybe not so much now. Tennessee playing on a short week, coming off of an important win for them, but it certainly doesn't get any easier. Who do we expect to outperform expectations, or should at least have high expectations for in that New England offense today?
Edelman. Edelman definitely will be a big play this week. And I think Michel's going to have a good day. I think that if they feel like he's ready to go, he gives a lot more versatility to this run game than Cordero Patterson, who basically is a toss sweep kind of, player who's going to run behind the fullback at all costs, because that's what they want him to do. And he's doing a very good job of that. And it's exciting to see. But that's it. That's what he can do. And certainly, he'll fill in, and I'm sure that they will use him in a variety of ways. Maybe they'll do some fun things where they'll put him in the backfield with Michel at the same time, motion him out, then throw him some screens or do some work on some short passes there and force the defense to think a little bit about them. But we'll see how well they construct that. And Patterson is kind of known as a guy that once he gets the plays down, he can operate them very well. But the issue is you need to have him work through them throughout the week and really get them down over the course of weeks before he really executes them. So if they add anything new to the game plan, I'm not sure if he's the guy that's unbelievably responsive to that. So I think Michel and Edelman are probably your best bets. The Jacob Hollister train never really got going, the Dwayne Allen train still kind of slowly chugging along in that, kind of, oh brother, where art thou single track kind of thing, at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. So I think those are the two guys that you really want to consider. And of course, Josh Gordon. I think Josh Gordon is
one snap play on Malcolm Butler. Do you think maybe they're going to go after Malcolm Butler in this one? Do you think, it's what everybody's doing anyway, but just a little bit. So on the Tennessee side, we did see one of the three good games so far this year for the Tennessee offense coming out of the bye against the Dallas defense. It certainly isn't a pushover, but we have Corey Davis likely locked up by Stephon Gilmore, who's been doing fantastic work this year. Does that mean that maybe it's a Dion Lewis week purely on volume, or maybe Jonnu Smith after he had some success on Monday night as a streaming tight end? Or do you think this is a game that Mariota is just outgunned, and even if this offense is set up with a good game plan and executes well, it's going to be a long afternoon?
My buddy Mark Schofield wrote a nice article about Marcus Mariota turning the corner, but I'm still a little skeptical myself. So I think this is a little bit of a letdown game. I do think Dion Lewis is a very good play this week against this defense because, frankly, you can say, well, certain teams know their opponents from them playing together and all of that. But this is a big, slow linebacking core, and he is a shorter, quick as can be back who they can do a lot of different things with. And it's a pretty good offensive line. It usually is. And so I think that this is the type of situation where you're probably looking at, more than anything, this is going to be a day for Dion Lewis. And that means it's not going to be a good day for the Titans passing game.
Probably not. And it's, we're going to see maybe some tightening in that division on bye. Really quickly, Gene, just to touch on this Washington-Tampa situation, not the players on the offensive line for Washington, but the backfield. I wanted to get your opinion, and I know this can be like quicksand, but is Chris Thompson? What's going on with this injury? It seems like we've been in a holding pattern where it seems like he's going to, speaking of turn the corner, get back on the field, and then he gets ruled out early in the week. What can you deduce from the real, not the hopes, but the actual hard data we're getting on his availability?
Yeah, I think it has more to do with the fact that he's got multiple injuries, making it really difficult to play through effectively between the knee stuff that he'd been fighting through before and what sounds like rib injuries on both sides of his body. The other thing we know about Chris Thompson is that he's a player that needs to feel confident in his health to be able to go out there and do what he feels like he needs to do. That was the concern. My read on the concern all the way through the summer with the leg situation was that he was physically ready to go, but was still feeling a little bit pain, wasn't sure, wasn't confident in how he was feeling. And that's going to be the same way. If you're a running back catching passes out of the backfield and you got rib injuries on both sides, reaching away from your body to make plays, knowing you're going to take hits, carrying the ball between the tackles, behind that offensive line, not that plays into Thompson's thinking that much, but if he's not confident in his ability to go and he's got injuries that are going to limit him, it makes sense to just settle him down, get him right and moving forward. Capri Bibbs has been playing pretty well, as has Peterson. The big issue with Washington is going to be the offensive line, though. I don't think it makes any difference what the skill position players in the offensive huddle are doing today. It's going to be, can they open up any holes or protect Alex Smith at all?
Yeah, you're nodding soberly, Matt. So this Tampa matchup is one that we've circled and put in big lights. You want to play everybody against Tampa. It's been pretty reliable. Is this the week you go away from that? If you need an Alex Smith streamer, Adrian Peterson on just sheer amount of touches and scoring opportunities, Maurice Harris. Let's go back to the RSP file on Maurice Harris. Is Maurice Harris somebody in DFS a cheap play, or you need a plug-in wide receiver, or do we go with that sober nod like? Even Tampa Bay can slow down Washington without an offensive line.
Yeah, I'm afraid that that's going to be the case. I mean, I'm looking at guys like Mike Davis as a possible substitute for Adrian Peterson in fantasy leagues right now because of that fact. I mean, it's such a great looking matchup on paper, but you have to wonder if you're calling up guys who weren't even on your roster to start for you. You have no rapport whatsoever. They're still learning the plays. It limits what Alex Smith can really do in terms of, changes at the line of scrimmage, in terms of his ability to, trick the defense, even with, some hard counts or anything like that. So this offensive line becomes that much more predictable. It's a tough situation. The best that you can hope for is that you look at Adrian Peterson and say, well, if he can get a little bit of a crease, he can create a lot on his own. And that's what makes him a special back, is that even now he's been able to do that a fair bit, even when that offensive line has just occasional breakdowns. So there's a hope there for him. But if you have guys that have been playing well recently and they have a decent matchup, and I'm saying like, a defense that's ranked in, 15th to 20th, in terms of against the run, you may want to seriously consider that running back against that matchup.
Yeah, this is a good test. We saw last week. It's like the race to the bottom. It's quien es menos macho. My Spanish is terrible. Roto y feo. However, we saw the terrible Miami defense and the terrible Sam Darnold, and the terrible Miami defense was less terrible than Sam Darnold. Now it's the terrible Tampa defense and the terrible situation Washington's offensive line is in. Matt, on the other side of that, Tampa, I'll get into some specific rankings if I can spit it out. I have Ryan Fitzpatrick as my number 10 quarterback. I actually have him ahead of Andrew Luck against Jacksonville, for instance. Is that too aggressive? Should folks believe in Fitzpatrick, even be slightly aggressive? And if we are, who are the players on the other side of those passes? As we saw against Carolina, it was Howard and Humphreys. For the first time, Humphreys. Was that an aberration or a potential trend in this offense?
I think the problem with this team is that there are so many weapons that it's hard to really predict week to week who are going to be the top guys, especially with a guy like Fitzpatrick who can target pretty much everyone. So I think Howard is a trend. I think Humphreys is an aberration. And I think that that's because you can still count on a fair amount of targets to guys like Gordon and occasionally Jackson. And of course, you have Mike Evans in that mix as well. So, unless there was some injury to Godwin that I'm just not, familiar with, or that I've been missing out on, it just seems to me that you're going to see more Godwin at some point. That's going to be kind of a back and forth between he and Humphreys at best for Humphreys. So in this situation, I feel good about Fitzpatrick and starting him above Luck. I just think that who his targets will be, you probably want to stick with Howard, obviously Evans, and then you're kind of looking at Godwin as a riskier flex play at this point. Same with Jackson, who's got that tremendous upside.
And doesn't Le'Veon Bell just seem like a future Tampa Bay Buccaneer?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, you can see totally that type of situation where he would be that. I think that's perfect.
It really is. Or
Buffalo Bill.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, we touched on Chris Carson. The name got raised, Gene. So last week, if you stuck your neck out and said, even though Chris Carson's a game time decision, I like Mike Davis to do more. So we have in the range of possibilities, Gene. One, that that Carson just is inactive, and then we have the last week where Carson is active but can't finish the game, or maybe we can include in that range Carson is active but not the starter, not the lead back, and then we have Carson ends up being active and semi-effective and plays out the game as the starter. Where's that needle going to fall today?
Much to the former, I think. I think it's way, way, way more likely that Carson is inactive than he's not, which means the likelihood that he gets in there and plays his pre-injury workload of snaps is essentially nil, I would think. I felt Pete Carroll was trying to tell us last week that Carson wasn't ready to go. There was a little bit of optimism overnight from Ian Rappaport, and then Carson was active. He only managed 10 snaps. He was rotating pretty heavily with Mike Davis in the beginning of that game anyway. Tightened up somewhere in the second quarter and came out of halftime and wasn't able to play. Didn't practice at all this week. Pete Carroll said kind of game time decision at best and sort of shrugged his shoulders about it, which is, even less optimistic than last Friday's comments from him. Knowing that's an injury that's been lingering and he's not been able to play effectively through it, it's highly unlikely that the Seahawks game planned with Carson in mind at all this week. So I was surprised last week was active. I'd be shocked this week he was active. So I think we're going to see a ton of Mike Davis with Rashad Penny as the change of pace situation, and hopefully we see Carson healthier sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're seeing a pattern here. One of the parts of the pattern is that Chris Carson lays it all out on the field, but the other side of that is that it's hard for him to stay on the field. This one's a fascinating matchup, Matt. I know when I've been thinking about Seattle against the Rams, I'm thinking about the situation in previous years when it was Seattle at the top of the division and the Rams, the team trying to play spoiler. And no matter what the records were or the trends, generally the Rams would play the Seahawks really, really tough. And we saw when the Rams, a top of the heap, came to Seattle early this year, 33-31, a game that was really right down to the wire. The Seattle running game was extremely effective, and they put Jared Goff off balance a few times. They also, Brandon Cooks went out early in that game too, though. So the Rams are, like the Chiefs, a pretty simple offense when it comes to fantasy projections. Let's look at the Seattle side of it, because we have Russell Wilson. We could put Russell Wilson on that above or below Ryan Fitzpatrick axis. Mike Davis, really, there's not a lot of complexity here. You're going to play him as a running back too today with Dr. Gene's ideas in mind, and also what Davis did earlier this year and what the Seattle offense did earlier this year against the Rams. But what about Doug Baldwin? What about Tyler Lockett? If we see a 31 kind of game, it was, I think, Lockett 3 for 98 and a touchdown in the first matchup. Or, and this is what plagues me when I project this game, Matt, I saw last week whenever the Seahawks fell behind the Chargers, they did not have an attack mode. They did not have a comeback mode. Russell Wilson still almost willed his way to a tie at the end of the game there if David Moore had helped him out, but that this could be disappointing across the board for the Seattle offense. What's in our crystal ball for this one?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that could be a problem. But at the same time, when Marcus Peters is basically your cornerback and that's it, you don't have Aqib Talib, and Sam Shields is coming back and playing a little safety, and you just look at this whole situation. The secondary is weak in Los Angeles, and I think that when you look at what Marcus Peters does best, he's not able to do that very well as the main guy, and that's why he's getting creamed pretty much every week. So you look at this team, and I think that there's plenty enough weapons with Baldwin and with Jerron Brown and with Lockett that they can do some decent work, and you could expect some big plays. The problem with Seattle's offense is that their receivers really are boom bust plays at this point, because it's all very strictly play action, deep passing type of work with a strict reliance on the run game. And they're spreading the ball around a fair amount that you're looking at that 3 and 5 and 6 catch type of game at most, as opposed to, 7, 10 and 12 catches. So it's, again, you're looking at flex plays with all of these guys at best, and, hoping for that. But I think they're strong flex plays, considering that it is this Rams defense that, while they can get penetration and get some pressure, Russell Wilson is so good at being able to extend time, and those receivers are good at being able to get downfield. It's kind of like that old. It's like that old Steelers offense back in prime Ben Roethlisberger times that our buddy Steve Vogt hates for me to invoke, which is he runs around and throws it up into the in that backyard kind of era thing with Mike Wallace just standing there waiting for the ball. So you're kind of getting that in Seattle.
I expect Seattle to put up at least a spirited fight in this one. We know this team's got a lot in them. I just hope that Brian Schottenheimer doesn't hold them back. Do you still have, by the way, on that note, and I think you laid out a good case for it, do you still have confidence that Russell Wilson is going to blossom as a fantasy quarterback in the second half of the year as he has in previous years?
It's slightly less than it has been, but I'm still, if I had to bet on it, I still would. And I think that's mainly because this team is running the ball so well that it does open up the rest of that offense in terms of how linebackers react, how safeties react to different situations and looks. So I think, and Mike Davis is running well. So as long as that offensive line continues to look as good as it does, that's going to buoy everything there.
Gene, as we do, and I appreciate our audience, our community. When I'm helping you, I hope I'm helping you with my answers. You're helping me because I'm getting an idea of the pulse of the fantasy hive mind. And what I'm sensing, Gene, is a great reluctance to play Leonard Fournette this week, a first-round pick or early second-round pick. Do you think that the collective conventional wisdom saying like, no, I want to see Leonard Fournette for a week before I play him is wise? Or do you think, no, we know enough to treat him the way you would have in week one going into the season?
Play him. Play him. I was cautiously recommending make sure that you see Fournette return to practice after the bye week, knowing that aggravated hamstring injuries are always a concern, and that it just looked like the Jaguars were planning to use the bye week as their launching point for Fournette. But until you saw it, there was no guarantee that that was happening because we know that they were going to take their time with him. You needed to see him do something through the bye week. We didn't hear much about last week. I don't think the Jaguars practiced much, but he was doing individual drills on Monday, which was the first good sign. And then it's been a week of full practice. And I know the hamstring and the aggravated hamstring is different than last year's ankle concerns, but everybody was nervous about Fournette's ankles coming into the league and then multiple issues, and then he missed some games. But when he's fully practiced, and Doug Marrone said this early this week, they're going to play him. There's no, the reason that they waited until he was able to prove themselves that he could get through a full practice without any setbacks was so that when he was there, they could use him in his usual role. So is there a concern that maybe he's not back to full condition and they hold him back a little bit? Yes, that's a concern in every player that goes through these multiple week injuries, but that's not been an issue with Fournette in the past. I don't see any reason the Jaguars aren't planning to use him for 18 to 20 plus touches. I think that's the game plan going in. There's nobody else on that depth chart that would make them consider not doing that. Their offense has been struggling for weeks. This isn't the Latavius Murray, Dalvin Cook type situation or many others. We had Derrick Henry that we had to worry about with DeMarco Murray and all his hamstring injuries in the past. This is TJ Yeldon and Carlos Hyde, who have been decent at times, but they're not going to bring what Leonard Fournette brings to the particular type of offense that Jacksonville wants to run. So there's no promises, right? We saw this with Darren Sproles this week. We saw it with Kiki Kuti, who had been seemingly recovered for a couple of weeks. So anything is possible. But if you've got Leonard Fournette and you've been sitting on him this long, unless you've got a clear running back one option to play and you're comfortable looking at a 24 for 120 and 2 touchdown line out of Leonard Fournette because you sat him, then play him and hope that he comes out of this game running as you've seen him earlier in the season.
Matt, that was Gene going strong to the hole on the Leonard
strong
Fournette
enough take for you?
I feel like that. Before this show, when I was joking that you were putting your arm around Gene in the car lot, trying to steer him towards a used car. I feel like Gene kind of turned around on you and said, "Hey, listen, I've got this 68 Ford, or 68 Impala here that." It's old. It looks great. It's reconditioned, but it's about to break down any minute. But look, man, you're getting older. You only live once. You've always wanted this car. You've been waiting this long for it to get out of the shop. It might last for, all of 4 quarters.
Matt, we're not talking about Adrian Peterson anymore.
Oh, that's right.
We moved on from that. Well,
there we go.
we may have moved on from the Jacksonville defense, Matt, and also we've seen Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis offense surging. This one's fascinating because number one, it's two teams coming off of a bye. Number two, it's two teams at a crossroads, but with the arrow pointing in different directions. Indianapolis, I think everything's back to, hey, Andrew Luck can take us as far as Andrew Luck can take us, and let's find out how far. And Jacksonville's back to, well, we're a team that matter what we do, critical points of failure keep us from doing that. But this was a Jacksonville defense that pretty reliably over the last year going into this season, if you were fading players, especially in the passing game against them, but the running game was also having trouble getting started, you felt good about those decisions. But this week, you have those decisions on, and really quick, Gene, anything that would give us any hesitation to play Marlon Mack based on what we've heard this week?
I don't think so. The Colts multiple times have put players on. They're kind of in the middle of the week, done some rehab stuff. You never like a lower body injury for running backs, but full practice on Friday wasn't on the injury report. Should be good to go.
So we've got four key players, or really five, Matt. We've got Andrew Luck as a quarterback decision. We've got Marlon Mack as a running back decision. We've got T.Y. Hilton, who very likely will have Jalen Ramsey on him. And I'll just toss out there that considering that Andrew Luck is a smart quarterback, no A.J. Boye. So, I mean, Ryan Grant's going to be back this week. There's Chester Rogers. It doesn't really matter who it is. We saw earlier this season, Luck's going to go at the places he wants to go at in the offense. And you also have the tight end combination of Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron, where the answer could be both, either, or neither. What's your feeling of the hot and cold zones in the Indy offense in what, at least on paper going into the season, looked like a tough matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I think Luck's kind of like a 55, 60-degree day, which means you're going to get about, 230 to 260 yards, probably 2 touchdowns, maybe 1 rushing. And so that's not bad against the Jacksonville's defense. That's pretty good, a little above average in yards and about on par for touchdowns, in terms of decent quarterback play. The running game, I think, is going to be pretty good. I actually think that Marlon Mack makes a decent start. I think Nyheim Hines could be a surprisingly decent flex play for you. And they're going to be able to run the ball, I think, on Jacksonville. And then, after that, I would probably count on T.Y. Hilton just because he is a tight coverage player. Even if he plays Jalen Ramsey, they're going to try and move him around and maybe not get him loose against them. And then I would probably look at Ebron as kind of a warm zone there. He and Doyle, they're going to try and mix some things up there to get somebody open on one side. But I think it's going to be more likely Ebron because those Jacksonville linebackers are pretty athletic and they can cover reasonably well. But at the same time, Doyle's that guy in PPR that could get you 8 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. And you're like, oh, that was a pretty darn good day, even though it is what it is. But doesn't Blake Bortles seem to you like last year, they were kind of like, we're good still with him. And look, he's even playing good for us. And now he feels like the pin that got that hit the balloon and has deflated all the air from that defense.
Well, it does. And it's, in relationship terms, the relationship has had ups and downs. And it did seem like last year, especially how he played in December and in the playoffs, that the organization was saying to Bortles, well, we understand your flaws, we understand your shortcomings, we understand your strengths, we understand how to handle you, and we want to make this work. We're going to be in the mindset of we're always going to make this work, and we know inside of you is the quarterback that we want, and we think we can bring that out. And it did seem like very quickly it was like, no, you're not the quarterback we want. Actually, we never should have doubled back.
I wonder how Jalen Ramsey's talking about him now compared to, saying Blake Bortles is better than, most of the quarterbacks that he was, who are clearly better than Blake Bortles. So.
Yeah, it's going to forecasting. Ben Volin had a piece this morning talking about the state of some of these quarterbacks, and there's going to be more quarterback musical chairs, but not like quarterback musical chairs with Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes and Case Keenum. More like Case Keenum because Keenum's going to be maybe involved. It's going to be more like the 2 a.m. at the bar kind of moment. But
or on somebody's couch in a Inglewood.
We'll edit ourselves there.
Bye, Cecil.
Yeah. No, look, Gene, let's talk
Chad's not here.
All right, stay on target. Stay on target. Gene, I guess one of the ways that I can load this up, it's a game. There's a game this week. Another team. There's teams now that are just trying to keep it going week to week. Green Bay, one of those teams. They have the good luck of Miami coming to town. How many roughing the passer penalties will Clay Matthews get today against Brock Osweiler?
I think he's done a little bit better lately. I think he's going to get there plenty of times. He's going to have plenty of opportunities. Let's leave it that way. I don't know. I think both of those guys are going to try to play. They did last week. It was a little bit unusual to not see Tunsil try to come back and play. I think he kind of wanted to and just ended up not being able to. I think he's closer to playing than Juwan James will be this week. They've already lost a guard and a center, one of their backup guards, Ted Larson, who isn't that good anyway. Doesn't look like he's going to be able to play today. So hopefully they'll at least have Tunsil with a little bit of luck. James will be able to go too, but yeah, I think Matthews is going to have his opportunities.
Yeah, and then some of the banged up players on that Green Bay defense, Blake Martinez,
who I think
Mike
should
Daniels.
play. Daniels is going to play.
Yeah.
Martinez is probably the iffiest of the bunch, but it was an outside ankle sprain. Those things swell up; they don't feel great, and then as the week goes on, usually you're able to move a little bit more, and that seems to be what Martinez was saying on Thursday into Friday. Antonio Morrison played reasonably well, so you may not see Martinez play the entire game. He's currently considered a game time decision, but I think he's going to go. Kevin King is the one that is probably the biggest loss right now. However, he's not going to play.
Matt, and this could be more for Dr. Gene because it's Xanax. It's brought to you by Dr. Gene or brought to you by Xanax. Do we have any hand-holding advice for Kenyon Drake teams, whether to play him or not this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do play him. I mean, I think that I know that people worry about the volume, and I think that's the main concern with him is he going to get enough volume for him to be a viable fantasy option? But I mean, he's been a viable fantasy option without the full volume thus far. So I like how they're using him against positional tendency, and I think that he's performed well enough that you just kind of got to know the risks with him. He's a boom bust running back one. That's essentially what he's been for you over the past 4 to 6 weeks. And you're gonna, if you bought him, you're gonna have to stick with it. It's the same thing like with Fournette. So, I would roll with him unless you end up with somebody who just has a dynamite matchup against a bad defense.
And on the Green Bay side, and while I've been crying, we're all having our shower cries about Rob Gronkowski, who is close to the end of his career. Probably, I don't know if Randall Cobb is close to the end of his career, but a la Gronkowski, it feels like we only got a short window to see what Randall Cobb could really do, and the injuries just continued to pile up. But what that sets us up with is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is Marquez Valdes-Scantling that chalk play that is going to come through? It's just so obvious he will be facing one of the lesser Miami corners, and he's been doing it anyway in limited snaps. Or is this one where it's the zonk? Monty Hall says, "Oh, you picked the wrong door. Actually, this is the Jimmy Graham scores 3 touchdowns week, or Devontae Adams still catches 10 balls, or Aaron Jones. This is Aaron Jones week at Lambeau."
I'm still betting on Jimmy Graham in this particular matchup just because Miami and tight ends. It sounds like that's pretty much a matchup made in heaven. I mean, when you think of Miami, there's lots of things that you could think of, in terms of that city. But if you're a football fan, it's tight ends getting into the end zone.
Yeah, and I think that Kiko Alonso has been. I always mention you, Matt.
He's the doorman.
Yeah, he is. He's the doorman. Exactly. And there's no velvet rope. Everyone's allowed in. Everybody is allowed in. So it's going to certainly be interesting to see. We know that there's going to be success in the Green Bay offense today. We're just not sure who. We know there's going to be success in the Atlanta offense today, Dr. Gene. But when we look at the Cleveland offense, one of the players that we've had a little bit of mystery around is David Njoku. And we know that if you're thinking of the Atlanta offense, certainly attacking the middle of the field. We're not going to get Deion Jones back quite yet. So this was set up as a good matchup for David Njoku. But is he in shape to take advantage of it?
I think so. The Greg Williams press conferences are a ton different than Hugh Jackson, right? So I don't think Demarius Randall knew he was inactive until the inactive list came out last week. So you're just not sure, right? Are we making players questionable that wouldn't have been questionable before, or is there something more going on. So yeah, that's an understatement. Y'all don't agree? I can tell.
No, it's great. I saw you
I know.
start to smirk. No, it was fantastic.
You knew where I was going. So I think Njoku's going to be fine, but you have to watch the inactive report just to be sure. Adam Schefter probably knows more about Njoku's status than Njoku does right now, it seems like. But I think he's going to be fine.
And what about the myriad of players on the Cleveland defense that we are concerned about going into this week?
So one thing Williams did say, and we're probably the best information we're going to get from Williams is from his about his most valuable defensive players, and I think that's what we saw with Ward. He said Ward looked much better toward the end of the week than he did the beginning. It's a hip flexor injury, which is going to be a little bit difficult for a cornerback to play through and a back pedal and then come out and explode. But I think he wants to play. I think Williams knows he needs him and is going to allow him to play. They're also going to get Joe Schobert back. They're getting healthier overall. I think Randall's going to play. But unless there's some sort of surprise, and we're still learning exactly how Williams is going to be with the media. My guess is that seemed like it wasn't a calculated response. It was sort of not really impulsive, but it was an accurate reflection of what he felt Ward was going to be able to do. So I don't know that he's going to be as effective as he was earlier in the season, and there is a chance that he aggravates the injury, but I expect Ward to be active, and I'm hoping he's going to be able to play well.
What we need, someone in the Cleveland organization, is the oral history of the Greg Williams era. Please take good notes, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that we're going to be very entertained by if we could only know what happens behind the scenes. But Matt, we're going to know what happens on the field because we're going to get to see it in Cleveland today. First, on the Atlanta side, it seems simple. I know John Norton will say, 1 week could be a fluke, 2 weeks trends. We only have 1 week of Atlanta's running game really clicking, but it was against a run defense in Washington that we were respecting. So do we just go back to Tevin Coleman this week? Is this silly? Why would you question it? Or is there good reason to question Tevin Coleman? And for that matter, we can even go a little deeper and say Ito Smith. Can Atlanta have 2 outstanding games running the ball and throwing to Tevin Coleman as receiver out of the backfield in a row?
Yes, yes, and yes, because Cleveland's defense has been weak on the edges, even when they were a stronger unit, and I think they're going to be able to run around Cleveland on that end of the spectrum pretty well. I think Julio Jones is going to have a massive day because if Denzel Ward can't really get out of his back pedal and can't transition quickly enough, some of those quick hitting routes that they like to throw for big gains, Jones on those slants and some of those post routes that he runs and some of those, that little post out thing, it's going to be difficult for him to cover. And then you have Ridley on top of that. So, I think Ridley's going to have a big day. I would definitely say that Jones is going to have a huge day. And Tevin Coleman is someone you definitely want to have in your lineup. And if you need, a flex play and you're thinking, I'm not sold on Adrian Peterson at this point because of what's going on here, Ito Smith's a risky play, but he does get love in the red zone, and I think Atlanta's going to get a lot of opportunities in the red zone to give him the ball. So I wouldn't be surprised if he scores a touchdown in this contest as well. And is Greg Williams a better interview than Mike Tyson after a fight or pre-fight, with the whole I am Alexander the Great kind of stuff, or is it just much more, odder?
Yeah, he belongs in the WWE. And yeah, I like the Ito Smith call 4 touchdowns the last 5 weeks. On that Cleveland side, Matt, as we're waiting for the call, they have interim head coach, but we have put Matt Waldman in the offseason search. But for the now, we have almost a similar question to the Tevin Coleman question. Do we look at the 1 week and trust the 1 week of Duke Johnson usage, and the matchup would induce you to do that anyway? Or should we be hesitant? And there anybody else you like in the Cleveland offense today in what should be a matchup where they have success throwing the ball?
Yeah, they should be. Cleveland's offense should have a very good day because Atlanta's defense isn't all that. I would just put it that way, is that you're going to have where they're strong is that kind of short passing game, and then they can kind of stretch it. They hopefully they hit something a little bit, past 20 yards here and there. But Duke Johnson should have a very strong day in terms of PPR leagues, number of receptions he gets, and he should be able to make a couple of those linebackers miss. They're very bad in space in terms of being able to make plays at that second level. And then on top of it too, I think that the interior of that offensive line, Grady Jarrett's pretty darn good up the middle there, but the linebackers I'm still a little bit, iffy on overall. So I think that Nick Chubb can have a solid day. He'd be a guy I'd also consider starting above Adrian Peterson this week. And then from a receiver standpoint, I mean, Landry, it just depends on how imaginative they are or not, in this offense. And I think that this is week 2 of the Freddie Kitchens, interim. So we're going to see if he does anything to put his mark on this offense to switch things up, because thus far what they did with Duke Johnson was made him, they did a lot of different looks with him to get him the ball. But when they went back to one of those looks, the defense sniffed it out last week, and so if they try and just vary every little look with Johnson, teams go, okay, now he's in this look, that means they're going to do this. Now he's in this look, now he's going to do that, instead of operating from one look and having him do multiple things from that one look, say like the Rams do. And that's what we're going to see this week, is whether they simplify things and make more difficulties for that defense, or if they try and overcomplicate their offense trying to move him around.
Gene, I don't think there's any way to overcomplicate this question. Is there any good news on the injury report for the Detroit Lions this week?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not too worried about Kerryon Johnson, honestly. We've seen other players kind of be listed questionable and get through practices and play. Detroit's really underreported, and that probably has as much to do with Matt Patricia and his New England background as anything else. But Blunt was taken off the injury report. Kerryon Johnson, I think, is going to be okay. Missing TJ Lang is a problem, but he's been in and out of the lineup for weeks anyway, between concussions and other injuries. So I would anticipate we're not seeing Marvin Jones on the injury report anymore. So I think we're in a pretty good spot with Lions. Is there somebody in particular you were worried about?
Actually, I was more thinking about Khalil Mack and Allen Robinson.
Oh, going the other way. No,
Darius Slay.
Well, that's true. Darius Slay, I left off. That would be an issue. Darius Slay is going to be an issue, and I'm not really sure what type of injury he's dealing with to know whether or not this is. It's got the smell of a multiple week injury at this point, as things often do in Detroit when we really hear nothing about what's going on. But yeah, on the Chicago side, Khalil Mack and Allen Robinson immediately practicing fully. Never a concern from them at all, from Chicago at all this week. And both of them aren't listed on the injury report at all. So hopefully Robinson looks better than he has in weeks, and Khalil Mack is not out there as a decoy / you're there and drop into coverage just to be a body on the field type situation.
So setting it up that way, Matt, it sure looks like, especially the way that Detroit offense looked, and in this transitions, we can talk about Cincinnati about this too. You take Golden Tate out. I call it like a stopper in the bathtub, and then the water went down the drain, and now you have TJ Lang out, and now you have Chicago's offense at full strength. It sure looks like Detroit is walking into a game where they have little chance. That being said, we look at the Chicago offense. Adam Shaheen even is going to be back soon. So you have Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, Anthony Miller, Trey Burton, Terry Cohen, and also Jordan Howard and Mitchell Trubisky orchestrating everything. Is it too complicated to pick a Chicago Bear this week, or is there someone you like in this offense?
Yeah, I certainly like Tariq Cohen. I certainly like Burton. I think that those guys are certainly on your radar there, and you want to go with them. I think the outside receivers are a little more problematic, but then again, because of some of the injuries that are there, I think Gabriel is a decent rebound play. The problem with this is, and I thought where you were going with this is, you've got all these players.
Oh, right.
Then you've got Mitchell Trubisky
out of sync. Yeah.
And then you've got Mickey Mouse, who's doing the directing with all the, with all the brooms that are all the magical brooms. So you wonder where that's going to head. But I think that he is the factor. If he plays well, then, you're looking at a 350 yard day, probably 2 receivers over 100 yards and a touchdown for each of them. And it's fantastic. But at the same time, he's the type of player too that could really mire down this offense with bad decision-making. So count on the good Trubisky this week. But I would say that, yeah, Cohen and Burton still remain the guys that you want to go with this week. Howard may help you, but here's the thing. Howard's not going to break off 40, 50-yard runs, but Tariq Cohen against a Lions defense that sometimes has bad run fits and has been known for that is the better chance for the big play and also what he does in that passing game. So I would continue to stick with Cohen. I think that those linebackers again are weaker, so you get that with Burton, and then I think with teams probably more occupied, putting their top guy in Allen Robinson, I think Gabriel comes back to life.
Yeah, Gabriel drew a long pass interference penalty. Gabriel's the one if you want that long touchdown. I really think either he's going to get the long touchdown or there's going to be plays he gets free and helps the offense move. And I agree with you. We saw the Detroit run defense with Snacks with Damon Harrison's been better, but we still saw that big run by Dalvin Cook last week, and Tariq Cohen maps more of that. I don't want you to get too much of the Cheshire Cat look here, but what about Kenny Golladay? Is this one of those situations where we're finding out, well, sure, it's great, he's getting more opportunity, but in this offense, and some of it's not on Golladay because things get more gummed up without Golden Tate, or do we look at last week as maybe a floor week and we still think a ceiling week is possible for him?
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna sit there and have any sort of like gloat over Kenny Golladay on some level because he's a good player, but I think that we need to have a few more weeks in the bag to see what exactly is going on here. I mean, I will say he's still developing as a receiver, so I mean there's some things that you kind of have to understand with that, but it's also some of that does have to do with, like you described very well, Golden Tate being the plunger taken out of the drain, cap taken out of the drain and all the water spilling out. I mean, he does tie that receiving core together pretty well in terms of what he does in the middle of the field and how that opens things up for everybody else. So now Galladay is going to have to adjust, and Stafford's going to have to adjust as well too. I mean, Stafford lost his binky, so I mean, we'll have to see how that works out.
Yeah, and I said this earlier this week, Gene. If Golden Tate is the stopper in the bathtub, AJ Green is the bathtub. So what do we? Have you heard anything? Can you give us anything to hang on to with the hope that AJ Green could be back and anything resembling himself? Have we heard anything this week to give us optimism?
Yeah, there was something this morning, just a little bit ago, that came across Twitter that I don't know if it was Schefter or Rappaport that said that he's expected to be out next week against the Ravens, but we know that Green wants to play and often recovers quickly. Tried to get back from that hamstring injury that he had at the end of last year a little bit more quickly than anybody expected. They're leaving the door open. Still feel like that initial report from Schefter was too specific when it was said going to miss 2 weeks and then reevaluate. Sounds like he's got another visit with Anderson at least planned, if not in person, to at least discuss how his recovery and rehab has gone before they allow him to return to play. It really sounded much like a 2 to 4 week minimum situation rather than a 1 to 2 week minimum deal from the time that he was seen by Anderson. So maybe a sliver of optimism there, but I still think, again, they're going to want him right. There's not going to be something that they want to have aggravated to where he truly is out for the rest of the season.
And if you were a Bengals fan, which I know you're not, Gene, would you be more concerned about the state of their linebackers right now than AJ Green? Facing the Saints this week.
Well, this week, yeah, sure. Burfict is still out. Vigil is still out. They don't really have anybody that can cover there right now. The safeties are questionable as well. Jesse Bates does a good job as a George Iloka replacement as a center fielding type safety, but Sean Williams is a big struggle. They're still without Darquez Denard on the outside. So there's going to be some concern there. The defensive line has not been productive. Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap have really not done much in the past couple of weeks. So it's not just the linebackers, it's the whole defense that's a concern. But the way the Bengals had been winning games was outscoring players. And without A.J. Green there taking away, teams are going to be able to focus on Joe Mixon and the running game a lot more. Do you trust that John Ross coming back, Tyler Boyd, without really any healthy tight ends there, who is going to be there and open for Andy Dalton? It remains to be seen. So I think you have to worry a little bit more about the offensive side of the ball for Cincinnati. It's the only really chance they have to keep up with Drew Brees anyway.
So Tyler Boyd's the name here, Matt. Is this simple as don't overthink it? He's going to get so many targets that even if they're lower efficiency, lower value targets, you keep playing him? Or is this the AJ Green was the keystone, the arch falls in on itself, and if you play Tyler Boyd, you're wondering, why did I settle for 3 for 32 even though it was on 10 targets?
I think that you have to take the chance with Tyler Boyd and see how that plays out to try and work that open. I mean, there is that risk that AJ Green basically being out spoils everything. But I think that the way that they will use Boyd is enough that defenses will go, fine, we'll give you that. I mean, that doesn't damage us now because we don't have the threat of, AJ Green going over the top or getting those 15, 20-yard gains. And I just got to ask you this. Would a Greg Williams press conference start talking about things like the links between New Orleans and Dallas, like with the Kennedy assassination, and then kind of somehow link that to Des Bryant's career assassination?
Sean Payton, yeah.
Do you think that he would go off that kind of deep end with the tinfoil hat type of stuff?
Yeah, I think that PFT commenter said, "Hey, Des, sorry, everybody gets tore up their first night in New Orleans." But
God.
Yeah, whew. And yeah, we'll see how I change. I'll be moving to the Crescent City soon. Bury the lead there. But I want to ask you, Matt, not about a team playing this week, not about a player playing this week, but how high is the priority? I mean, all the action probably happened yesterday, but if your waivers are closed or otherwise you're looking forward, how high is the priority to roster Lamar Jackson now?
I think you have to look at him as a quarterback too, that you want to, if you have a quarterback too that you never start and you're just holding on to because you're hoping that your starter doesn't get injured and he can give you those 220 to 250 yard days with a couple of touchdowns and be glad for that, then you may want to get Lamar Jackson and use him above that quarterback. I mean, drop that quarterback for him. There's a bigger boom bust element there, but because of the fact that he can run and he's a better pocket passer than people have given him credit for, I think that you're going to see if they're obviously going to use him, they feel like they've seen enough of this team that they feel like it's time to give him that playing time. And that's great. They've given him half a season to just kind of get on the field a little bit. And while I hate the usage that they gave him, it was enough to kind of let him be on the field and get a feel for how fast things move in the NFL. And I think that's helpful to an extent. And now he's going to get that in-game, in-season playing time. And if he screws things up enough, maybe they'll put Flacco back in, but maybe they'll do it in a way where they say, listen, we're going to have Flacco in here for a few, for a series or two, and we're going to give you a chance to kind of calm down and get back into it. And if they do that intermittent thing, that would be fantastic. If not, I think probably more likely what's going to happen is Flacco's like, I'm done, I'm out of here or whatever. And they'll use Jackson for the rest of the season. But he's that type of talent who, even if he doesn't play great football, as a rookie, he can wind up giving you great stats early on as defenses are trying to figure out how to adjust against some of his abilities as a runner and thrower.
And Gene, is this where you come in and defend the honor of defenses, even defenses like Cincinnati and Oakland coming up on the schedule, and say, Lamar Jackson, based on what we saw in the preseason, based on what we know about his development, it will be easier to defend than we think? Or is this one where, as Matt was saying, he may not be playing well, but he can still post good numbers for fantasy?
Yeah, can't have a softer initial landing spot than what's currently going on in Cincinnati and Oakland right now, defensively. I'll take the Jackson side on that one.
Lamar Jackson. I have a feeling we'll be talking more about Lamar Jackson next week. We come here to you every week on Sunday morning, on Thursday night. Lots of other episodes of The Audible, lots of other things. Footballguys.com. Thank you for being part of our community, supporting what we do, giving us the opportunity to serve you. We love to serve you the best always because you're so classy.